Thank you very much, Kerry's, and thank you very much for the invite to come and speak with you today and share some of my ideas, research, and human life experiences at the moment. And I do look forward to having a kind of a opening up the communication lines at the end of the talk, because I really do like to hear about what people's experiences of living in this modern technological world that seems to be escalating in advances, with lots of benefits, but also lots of perils as well. So do, if you can think of anything to share, please do. I have slides here, so I'm going to just share some slides, but I will be going off on tangents as well, which I find that I think the tangents are useful because I don't like to be pre-programmed by slides. I like that human effect of, I'm going to say something, but I'm not really sure where it's going to go, and that usually kind of leads us into more interesting territory. So, as Kerry said, the title is probably a broad enough title: psychoanalysis, cybernetics, and the rising powers of techno-capitalism. But a kind of a cryptic, suppose, subtitle there: "Don't dream, it's over." I don't know if anyone knows the famous Crowded House song, "Don't Dream It's Over." But anyway, I was a little bit cheeky, and I put in a comma after the "don't dream," and that's purposeful, because I think there's an overarching sense that I have that there is a technological system out there that doesn't want us to dream, that just wants us to follow orders like an automaton. But I'm going to be making the argument for dreams. So I'm just trying to see, can I? Yes, lovely. So the aim of the talk is, or sorry, the aims of the talk would be exploring the impact of technology on mental health. And I suppose to do that, we're going to be looking at, I suppose, capitalism. Capitalism has been here for a while, but we're in a particular type of capitalism called neoliberal capitalism. And in order to understand capitalism, we will be looking at some of Karl Marx and some neo-Marxists that are kind of contemporary thinkers of the effect that this system that we're living in affects not only our mental health, but our relationships, our work, and certainly it provides us, it creates symptoms, and then it designs ways to try and provide health interventions for them symptoms, which is a nice little neatly packaged, where in fact, a lot of the responses to our symptoms and our mental health, it actually exasperates, such as in a lot of cases, I suppose, medication. I'll also be looking at Sigmund Freud. You're probably wondering, Karl Marx, Sigmund Freud, these are kind of old schoolers from the 19th century, but their theories are still, they're even more prevalent today to understand what's going on. And also we're looking at, it's not only from the Germanic world, we're looking at Jacques Lacan. He's a psychoanalyst. He was a kind of a real Freudian, and he reinterpreted Freud's theories through kind of linguistics and cultural anthropology, and he really focused us in on our language and how we speak. And in essence, he talked about, well, the language we speak ultimately shapes how we perceive the world, and if someone can control the language you speak, well, in essence, they can control you. I suppose the talk today, I'm going to hopefully focus in on chatbots, which I've written some articles on over the last few years, and I became very interested in chatbots when I heard about the ghost bots that are being designed, that people can bring people take their data. When someone dies, they can take their data, their images and all that, and these ghost bot technologies can recreate them on a screen, and the loved ones or those who want to reconnect with them, not unlike a seance, can communicate to them. So I kind of wrote about some of the risks of that and the risks to the grieving process, and how it can cause impact the person more psychologically. But it's not all going to be doom and gloom. I do hope to look at some of the positives and some of the benefits of this recent surge in technology and AI. But also, I probably will be also sharing the kind of, if it keeps going the way it's going, the dystopian future that lies ahead for all of us. So I suppose some of the benefits, like for technology, it has improved our access to information, enhanced efficiency, the facilitation of innovative problem solving across various domains and various degrees of sophistication, from clarifying concepts. We were speaking about the impact it's having on universities, and how AI can write a university assignment, but also the limitations of therein, and universities have had to kind of increase their awareness of this, and to be able to kind of spot I suppose assignments that have been written by AI. It can pre-print articles, it can compose song lyrics, film scripts, it can calculate tax deductions, it can advance medical practice by helping people to develop new proteins and drug medicines. So it has loads of benefits. So we really are in a kind of a sharp surge of advancement. There's one of the things that I've become interested in the last while, and even observing myself, that everything, if I want to know something, it's just a click away on the phone. And if you want, if you want to know something, so instead of thinking about it, or instead of kind of coming up with ideas yourself, or using imagination, that we're kind of short-circuiting that, and going to technology before we're kind of using our brains. So there has been research, current research at the moment, how it is decreasing cognitive functioning, and no doubt decreasing creativity. And what I'm interested in is, especially when I'm working with clients, is their own imagination, their own fantasy, their own dream world, their inner dream world, which I think technology is certainly affecting. One thing I always ask clients when they come and see me first, usually apart from the normal assessment, I'd always, why did they come? Why did they come now? What are their symptoms? Depression, anxiety, suicide ideation, addiction, relationships. But I'd always ask them, just as a by the by, tell us about, do you dream? And a lot of them would say, oh, no, I do, but I can't remember my dreams. And I always ask them, tell us your bedtime routine, what goes on. And a lot of them would say, I just go to bed around this time or that time, and I always just come on my phone and just going through Instagram, Facebook, and then when I get tired, I just turn it off, and I said, okay, that's grand. And you don't remember your dreams? No, okay. And I said, what do you do when you wake up? And 95% of them would say, I just pick up my phone. And then, so people aren't getting a break from the technology and being bombarded by social media, and all sorts of algorithms that are politically devised and infused with ideology to shape how people think. So I always just say, that's grand, thanks for sharing that. And I always probably over time bring them to maybe, suggesting they should give themselves a break before bed and not go to it straight away. And why not try and remember one or two things that you had a dream of. Now, a lot of people say, I don't dream. And I'd always say, well, now, after this conversation, you will. And they always do. So dreaming is a real, like, potent unconscious activity that our egoic defenses are down at night, so we get to get access to this unconscious world. So, but when they do that, they always do remember dreams, and they always bring them in. So this becomes a part of the work, a part of the work for us to explore and to build their, I suppose, articulate insights into this unconscious world. And we always just kind of try and piece together some of the dreams, which is always gives profound insight into the person, but also it helps people throughout the day. The more they can connect with their dreams, the more that they're piecing it together throughout the day themselves. Some people have dreams over a few nights or recurring dreams. So these are really important to the work that I do and the work that a lot of therapists and especially psychoanalysts would do as well. So probably before I go any further, I'll probably just say that I was a kid that grew up in the 80s. I don't know if anyone here can second that, but it was a very interesting generation, because there was a lot of brilliant films out in the 1980s, and there was a lot of films that were probably over 18s, but a lot of parents didn't really know what that meant, so we were able to watch them at a young age. You know, wouldn't recommend it, but a lot of these films that came out in the 80s were science fiction films, which I just think is so striking now that a lot of the films that had come out in the 80s were anticipating a lot of what's happening now at the moment. So I don't know if anyone can remember Total Recall with Arnold Schwarzenegger. He was in a lot of actually science fiction movies, but there was a good bit of time travel in that, which I don't think that's happened yet. Well, maybe in some alternative philosophies there is time travel, but in Total Recall there was a thing called a Johnny Cab, and a Johnny Cab was a self-driving car, and basically would bring you everywhere, and it'd be a lovely robot, and it would talk to you, and if you didn't pay your fare it would blow up. But anyway, I hope that doesn't all come true, because these are being rolled out in California and possibly in the next year in Europe, and no doubt in Britain will follow. RoboCop. RoboCop is another classic film. There's been a newer edition, but basically there's a robo dog in New York that's going around policing. So, and the Terminator. I don't know if the Terminator like films were just magnificent, but ultimately that I think Arnold Schwarzenegger played the film. So there's these things now that's just being published about how kind of robots will become a part of people's lives, that everyone will have a robot. They're predicting in kind of 10 years robot to some form, or maybe cleaning, or maybe getting a cup of tea, and hopefully they're not Terminators. But my point is that actually what's happening at the moment is that some of these designs in AI and chatbots, they're going a bit rogue, and they're not keeping to the script, and they're saying things they shouldn't. So if it can say things that it shouldn't, maybe it's only a matter of time before the robots will start doing stuff that they shouldn't. But here's the thing: there is chatbots at the moment where just this recent article, AI-powered toys caught telling 5-year-olds how to find knives and start fires with matches. So there you go. Don't allow your kids conversations with chatbots yet, until they've sorted out the guardrails of it. And here's another thing, just what I think of it, and I really want to mention it, that there is a real, you might have heard that there's a new people in power across the big pond there in the USA, who are trying to get rid of kind of guardrails for technology, and get rid of like, I suppose mainly targeting Europe, where Europe are putting some of these safety systems involved in Facebook to stop spreading of lies and to stop the interference of like electoral systems and all this, so which is happening, which is being interfered with. But they don't want that, and I wonder why they don't want it. They don't want it because they want to share their ideology and their control over power, resources, and people. So ultimately, they're using all the tricks, the dirty tricks of the book, to try and create a far right in order to sustain their own authoritarian vision, and are really challenging Europe and England around this. So hopefully, I'd like to think we're on the right side of the pond, where we do have a lot of really because excellent newsworthy kind of news outlets like BBC or Sky, and in Europe and in Ireland as well. Not without its faults at times, but there's a really kind of strong ethic around truth. But anyway, so there's my little sidewinder. So here's another one, which I think is very significant. I wanted ChatGPT to help me. So why did it advise me to how to kill myself? And I was in the BBC a few weeks ago, and a few weeks ago again. A predator in your home. Mothers say chatbots encourage their sons to kill themselves. So this is happening. Chatbots are doing this. And it's gas in OpenAI, which is one of the creators of like chatbots, ChatGPT, and all that. It does have in the the small print, it might say things that it shouldn't, or it might have hallucinations where it kind of creates content out of nowhere, and it might say things. So this is actually what's happening, and it's very serious. And I know, if you're a parent, anyone's a parent of teenagers now, which I am, and of a teenage daughter, and they do have phones now, and they do have social media. So it's there's no doubt they're being subjected to a lot of ill content on TikTok or Instagram or the rest. I'm glad I don't know anymore, because I'd be only tempted to join. But anyway, so there's a lot of content there. So a lot of people, if you're down, we all have periods of being down, and we all have periods of being vulnerable. Open to suggestion. So if this content and our increased use of technology is going along the time, we're more increased chance of us getting sucked in, or us catching us at a wrong moment. Where a lot of clients had come over the years and talked about being scammed, and my job is to always explore what was going on at the time. What was it about the scam that kind of sucked you in, or what was it about the dream it was offering, or if it was an online person, was it a male or female, and what were they saying? So I'd always kind of try and get an insight into what was going on for them at the moment. But a lot of them are extremely skilled at doing scamming people and manipulating them. So but I suppose my point is that a lot of this they're autonomous computers that are doing it, essentially. Yeah, lovely. Just a slight bit of nerdy information. The film in the Terminator series, that in the whole film was based about this Skynet, where humans create this AI technology, but after a while the technology starts to fight back, and then it becomes an all-out war with the humans and the robots. But in 2027, someone sends reprograms a robot and sends them back to the future, back to the past, to prevent the war from happening in the first place. So we're heading into 2027 in 2 years. So you'd like to think that if only we could go back in time to maybe slow some of this advancement down and put in guardrails at the start, it'd be a nice thought. But anyway, just thought that in 2027, if you do see a Terminator going around the streets of wherever you are, Wales, don't be surprised, because it was written into the Terminator series. So the one thing as a psychotherapist I was always interested in, and that was why do people have symptoms? Why do people um, why do people get unwell? And I suppose as a psychotherapist, the training is really about kind of, beyond that over proposed theory that there is um, an imbalance, a chemical imbalance. That's why there's depression. That's why there's anxiety. That's why there's psychosis. You understand that actually, we are the kind of products of our environment. We are very much shaped by our past experiences, and we are very much shaped by the society that we're in. So it wasn't before long where I got interested in I suppose Karl Marx, and he has written so much literature, and his works have been kind of inspired by a lot of people who tried to create revolutions and tried to create, I suppose, communist societies and all that, and a lot of them have many of the elements of it failed in many ways because ultimately humans are involved in the system. But Karl Marx was an idealist. He was only a writer. He was only really a writer to try to interpret the economy and the social system that we live in, and ultimately to critique capitalism. And he argues that it's a really exploitative system where the bourgeoisie, the owners of the capital, extract, I suppose, the work from the labour of the proletariat, of the workers. But basically, it works them too hard, and it works them to ill health. And it'll always try and work a person to get the most out of them. But ultimately, it does this to provide riches for the ruling class. So Karl Marx became aware of this. It's very much a dominant system in the West, in industrialization, where the system will work people to provide money for the ruling class. So in this, he kind of spoke about there's overproduction, class conflict, a serious concentration of wealth. So this was in the 1850s where he was writing a lot of this. Over 175, is it something like that? Nearly 150 years later, has it changed much? No. To answer everyone's question, it hasn't. In fact, the super rich, the billionaires have got more rich, and the gap between rich and poor has increased. So he anticipated this. He did say that there's life after capitalism, which is a kind of socialist society. So in a lot of governments, luckily there's a lot of socialist ideas about treating, I suppose, equality, but we're definitely very much still in a capitalist society. So but I suppose our awareness of this kind of helps me understand, and when I'm working with clients, what's going on, what's their symptom saying. So a lot of what Karl Marx said was, and it was quite profound, and he spoke about that, how when we're working in a system, this capitalist system, it separates us as people because we're all working in a system. We're all competing for power, and we're competing with each other to provide work for the ruling class. So it kind of separates us. So it creates a kind of an antagonistic separation from each other. But he also said profoundly that it separates ourselves from ourselves, so that we become quite disconnected. And he kind of gave the example of that we become like the workers are just workers, they're just like machines. They become like the machine. So the system doesn't care about you're feeling tired or you're feeling not up for work today. It wants you to work. So it has come up with all the tricks of the trade in order to convince you to work, keep on working, and ignore what you're feeling and ignore what your body's saying. So if this is the case, the capitalist system is a really disconnecting mode of mode of machinery that really has a profound impact on us. So along with, after Karl Marx, there was here's a book that it's called Marx and the Robots. It's very good because it really brings us up into the modern world, how in many ways the world we're in now, we're even more disconnected from each other. Yes, we have the illusion of connectivity, but we're ultimately still disconnected, and in many ways we're working even harder, because with the blurred boundaries of work and home, we're bringing a lot of work home. We're going around with laptops, and I say we because I get caught in this preparing a lecture. You're up at night then, and my children are watching me going around with laptops. And I'm probably, there's more opportunities to work more than we can work. And I'm going to get to this further when I want to talk about neoliberalism, but it's there. And actually, here's a great book for everyone. It's called Politics of the Mind, Marxism and Mental Distress. And it really goes into great detail and great research by Ian Ferguson about how the system that we're in produces these symptoms. Sigmund Freud, many would know Sigmund. I know of Sigmund Freud, I've heard of him. You might even say something of the lines of, yes, he was interested in the unconscious, and he was interested in sex, and he had these crazy theories of how there's infantile sexuality, and you're not wrong. He was very much interested in that, and he was very much interested in how we are influenced as adults is very much shaped by our early experiences. And one of the really central things in his work was that that idea of loss, that when we are separated from our parents, suppose ultimately our mother, when we're separated, there's a physical separation, but he was interested in the psychological separation. And he said that, he spoke about that, how this can cause a lot of, personality shape, what personality will be regarding how that goes and how that's accommodated. But a lot of that is that when we are separated psychically from our mother and our father, there's a loss, and that ultimate loss that we all share, and that we all have this kind of lack in us. And he was very, he wrote very profoundly on how our life is just trying to kind of fill in that loss and that lack that we have, and the symptoms are nearly a kind of way to try and symptoms that we have are nearly a defense against this loss and lack. And it's not only as infants we experience this loss and lack, but throughout life. But this loss and lack are not only negative things, because we ultimately, and he said it very clearly, that we ultimately have to kind of separate from our parents in order to develop as adults, and in order to find what he would call love. A lot of people say he spoke too much about sex, but ultimately he was talking about love and about connecting with others, and about that love it comes from a place of emptiness, and it comes from a place of loss. So he was very much interested in supporting people to find love, to love themselves, to be open to love, to work, to and to thrive. But this is interesting because he kind of took up on what Marx was saying, that how we're disconnected from ourselves, and he said that ultimately we have our conscious thoughts, but we also have kind of unconscious feelings which are often repressed, and if we can't communicate or articulate what we're feeling, they're kind of out of our consciousness. But he talked about how these unconscious feelings and emotions are very much shaping how we see the world and how we perceive the world. So here's kind of a combo of Marx and Freud kind of speaking about the design of the human in this contemporary world. And along after Freud came, I'm just going to speak about, I will talk about Freud, like he was the kind of really the scientific mind behind interpreting dreams. So he wrote a book called The Interpretation of Dreams, which was profound, which shone a light on how people dream, and the meanings of dreams, and how these meanings can provide great insight into all our unconscious activity. So this was, profound back in the day. But another brilliant paper he wrote was in 1920. He wrote Interpretation of Dreams in 1900, at the beginning of the 20th century, and in 1920 he wrote another paper called Beyond the Pleasure Principle. And basically he talked about how we keep on repeating the same things in life, despite it having negative consequences. So this was highlighting his theory that when we repress something, that it's not only repressed and out of consciousness. He talked about the return of the repressed. So it keeps on returning to be spoken about. And I see this all the time in the clients I work with. They keep on doing things that have negative consequences on them. And not only clients, I admit myself, of doing something to a point of making me unwell or exhausted or angry. I did a lot of work with people in addiction. And that addiction is classic. Like, people know that if you do this will have a negative impact on you. But there is a repetition compulsion in this, where we keep on repeating the same things that keep us unwell. And this paper is just over 100 years old. It's very much connected to what we do now. If we look at our phone use, we know it's garbage. We know we feel rubbish after doom scrolling, but we still do it. And that's ultimately, this paper was really insightful to kind of say, well, what is repressed, it will return. And ultimately, you can connect that to the Marxist, the automaton. We're nearly in a repetition of technology use now, where we're not even questioning what we're doing, we're just doing it, and we're just subjecting ourselves to more and more. And ultimately, that's where I would be in line with a lot of neo-Marxists at the moment, to say that actually there is a cynical ruling class that are in line with big tech, and that want us to keep on consuming and working more than we can work, to divulge, to indulge in all this ideology and imagery, fake news, and in order to share it. And if you think of the algorithms, which I'll touch on in a few minutes, but all these algorithms are designed to target all that unconscious stuff that we're not fully aware of, all the anger, the rage, all them emotions that we're not fully aware of. These are ultimately designed to target them, to get us to click on it's called clickbait, really, to click on it, to watch videos that disgust us, appall us, and drive us mad, in order to kind of share it and to repeat it, and to basically we become part of the system then of spreading the ideology. So this is Jacques Lacan. This is the heir, and some people will say the heir to Freud's thinking. And if you know France, that I suppose Britain are famous for their rock bands. Well, in France, they're famous for their philosophers, and he was very much a significant theoretical psychoanalyst. Like, I think he offered so much to philosophy in the 20th century, even though he'd say, listen, I'm just a psychoanalyst, all I'm here is to interpret the unconscious. But he offered great ideas on subjectivity, on how we are, and he took up what Freud said, that we're split subjects. There's a conscious and unconscious, but he focused in on language, and he spoke about that, how when we use language, we're not really only using language, but the language is using us. And he talked about language as the Trojan horse. And I don't know if that classic story of old Greek times, of the Trojan horse, where the Trojan army gave a gift to their enemy of a Trojan horse, and the enemy took it as a sign of defeat by the enemy, and they took it as a gift. But ultimately, inside the horse was the Trojan army, and at night they came in and they slaughtered the army that they were trying to attack. So he said, Jacques Lacan said, language is like a Trojan horse. He said, be careful how you use it, because within it there are signifiers and words that we're not fully aware of it but have other meanings. And this, he said, that this is how language uses us. So if you think about how what's happening at the moment, which there's been the language of the computer, the language of the chatbots, the language of the internet, all this language that we're digesting, within it there are all these signifiers that we're not fully aware of, but we use all the time, and it's ultimately shaping what we desire, or what we perceive, or how we behave. So ultimately, as my job as a psychotherapist, I'm very much interested in the language when someone is speaking, and I'd always get them to question, oh, that's an interesting thing you said there. Could you say a bit more about that? And I'd get them to become aware of the language that they're using, especially people if they're talking ill of themselves. I'd be kind of interested. Well, where did you get to learn that kind of very negative view of yourself? Where did you pick that up, and what does that mean, and is that true? And maybe, using some CBT of looking for the evidence of what they're saying, and how they're interpreting the language that they're using. So this is Karl Marx, Sigmund Freud, Jacques Lacan, and ultimately Jacques Lacan kind of took Freud and Marx in a way, and became very aware that to say that actually, well, history repeats itself through language. It's our language that keeps on repeating these signifiers, these certain words that keep us entrapped in these symptoms. And this is by speaking about it, or unraveling the language that we're using, becoming aware of it. We're aware of how the language keeps on bringing us back to the place of trauma, and our symptoms will demise. So Jacques Lacan was very much interested in how the language that we speak becomes very much like a class system. It turns us into kind of workers, that we become workers, but we become separated from the meaning that we're trying to achieve through language. So again, he was using this Marxist idea to kind of go, well, actually, when we speak, we're being repressed and oppressed and shaped and becoming like the proletariat. So a part of what happened in the 20th century, you might be aware if I mentioned the band called the Beatles, if I mention a person called Che Guevara, if I mention the psychedelic 60s, you might think of some of you might not have been born then, I certainly wasn't, but the Beatles live on. But this was a real significant period in history, because what happened was there was a revolt against the capitalist system, and there was a revolt against these authoritative systems, and ultimately against industrial capitalism with these massive corporations. And it kind of created this kind of such oppression, and it was like what Freud said, well, what is repressed, there will be return. So it was like a symptomatic response to this capitalism, and in the 60s became this really great revolt against what was happening, and people became aware of, actually, I have my own opinion. I can observe that you're abusing, like what was happening down in South Africa. There was genocides across the world. There was women had no votes and no power. People of different ethnicities were being oppressed. The Vietnam War was happening, where America just came in with its big military industrial complex and just obliterated, and Russia as well. Obliterated Vietnam. So this was a really significant time in history. So why am I mentioning this? Because this was a response. This was a kind of revolution against our capitalist system. So I'm going to mention this now, but we're going to come back. I'm going to leave this as a kind of a little thread with you, because we are ultimately looking at what way to respond to our current system at the moment, which is even more manipulative and oppressive and powerful. Because what happened after that revolution, a lot of philosophers say, oh, it changed everything, it changed how we view the world, and in many ways it did create a lot of there was a lot more focus on civil rights. There was a lot more focus on unions of people organising, and a lot of big governments, big corporations were being challenged, and there was awareness of our earth and our ecology and the environment. But ultimately, Lacan was probably one of the French philosophers who kind of said, be careful what you wish for. Be careful what master you're trying to overthrow, because there'll always be another one. And ultimately, he was talking about that, ultimately, that we need some sort of a guide to kind of organize society. We need to be some way, in some way, there's always be a desire for the master, or what Sigmund Freud called the father. There'll always be a guide or a desire for that. So Lacan was like, be careful what master you're trying to overthrow, and be careful what master you wish for, because you're going to get them. And that's exactly what happened. And this was the birth of neoliberalism. And neoliberalism is the current form of capitalism that we're in at the moment. And ultimately, it came around in the 80s, and you can see that, from the revolutions in the 60s to the, all the civil rights, all the unions, all the great power that the people got back in the 60s and 70s, the late 60s and 70s, ultimately in the 80s, the ruling class regrouped, and in a lot of governments such as Margaret Thatcher, Ronald Reagan, they regrouped and they created a system called neoliberalism. So what's neoliberalism? It's a political approach that favors free market capitalism, deregulation, reduction in government spending, and basically it's a system that it imposes the customs of market-orientated thinking that installs false needs that people are conditioned to want to satisfy but never can, and insatiable super-egoic pressures to engage in risk and excess that can propel repetitious and addictive behaviour. So ultimately, if we could see what happened in the 80s, it was really the beginning of the of consumerism, mass production. So kind of consumerism took wave. So we became into the system where the more things are produced, the more things are advertised, that you become what you consume. So this was a really strong form that kind of took over countries, including Ireland as well. As we know, this was kind of happening in the 80s, but in Ireland we had our own kind of Celtic tiger, where there was a real boom. And there was a real boom, and when I say boom, I can't help but say bust as well, because in this neoliberal system, there's always a boom. There's always, I suppose, an increase of something. But like anything that keeps on going up and it escalates, there's always a boom. There's always a crash. So this is ultimately what happens, that people can only consume so much, the economy can only consume so much, such as an increase in housing and property, and ultimately that there is what happened in Ireland and in many other parts was the property bust, and what happened in America with the Lehman Brothers, that they borrowed so much that it just crashed. And who paid it for it? The ordinary people. And who got away with it? The bondholders and the super rich. They didn't get touched. So this is the current system we're in, neoliberalism. So this current system is neoliberalism. And if you look at neoliberalism, it's from boom to bust to boom to bust. And if that kind of rings a bell, I call it the bipolar empire. So it's a system that propels people to work competition, which is a toxic distortion of our creativity and sociality as we sell our labor power. So this is a lot of times clients come in with these symptoms of just doing too much, working too much, doing stuff in excess, and then coming in getting burnt out, and then going back out and doing the same things as well. So we're becoming like, you know, automatons, just repeating these same symptoms over and over again. And this is what Karl Marx originally said, this is how the system shapes our mind. We become bipolar. We become in addiction, whether it's cyber addiction, drug addiction, sex addiction. And one of the bigger addictions at the moment is that's not getting the mainstream news is porn addiction, and especially teenagers getting access to porn addiction. So this is not just you know, this is, you know, sex has been sold, and especially artificial sex has been sold in this current system of neoliberalism because it's making profits for the ruling class. It wants people addicted. It wants people constantly engaged in this and controlled and not thinking about other alternatives to live. It doesn't want the system, the current system of liberalism wants people burnt out and using the system then to get maybe treatments, medications, and it wants them in this cycle of boom bust. And I kind of, there's a lot of writers who are talking about this neoliberal wellness and conscience industry, and one of the, I suppose, the great reflections at the moment of, and Karl Marx was aware of it, that the system of capitalism, it isolates people. It wants people on their own. And you might think, oh, isn't it good that people have more control and more awareness, and they have their phones and they have their wellness apps? But ultimately, that these apps are they're keeping people more isolated. Where in fact, years ago, there'd be more community, there'd be more connections with other people if people were doing not doing too well. Where there's been an increase in this idea of self-optimization, that you are the controller of your own wealth and well-being. There's these, I suppose, workout gurus, or nearly they've taken the replacement of kind of religious priests about preaching about wellness, and you have to be, you know, if you're not on this 5 a day, exercising 3 times a week, you're not doing it properly. You need to do it more. So it's a system. The neoliberal system is not only associated with the negativities of addictions, but it's also it's affecting the wellness industry of how we're doing it. And you need to be doing your yoga. You need to have your instructor. And ultimately, this creates kind of burnout and maladies and all sorts of other symptoms. So ultimately, you know, the system, and this is the classic example, how the system that's causing these issues is creating these pseudo wellness interventions to be able to kind of heal them. And this is where ultimately it's isolated everyone. We're all in our cocoons on our phones, and it's providing us with these apps for wellness. One of the biggest addictions one of the biggest disorders in Ireland is the sleeping issues and sleeping disorders. And like that, when people go to the doctors, of course they're going to get fired out sleeping tablets, but there's sleeping apps to help you monitor your sleep. But ultimately these apps are just if you're like, and I've listened, I download a lot of these apps as well, partly due to, you know, getting caught up in a fad, but also getting for research as well. But when you're on these apps, there's all these advertisements coming up for, you know, do you want a better bed to help get your perfect sleep, so you be a perfect worker and you be okay with you and your family, and you'll never get angry and everything's going to be okay. So anyway, these apps are creating advertising, and they're just ultimately serving big business, big corporation and ruling class. So I don't know if anyone knows Zizek, but Zizek is Slavoj Zizek is a Slovenian psychoanalyst, but he talks about how ideology is not just a simple set of beliefs, but is a powerful material system. It functions as a structured fantasy that shapes our social reality and our desires, and provides a framework for understanding the world, often unconsciously. So he talks about how ideology is ultimately what shapes our world. And in this era of the tech and phone, that it has a real grip on people because it's shaping how people should be. We should be fit, happy, productive, and if we're not working harder than we can, we're not doing it right. So there's this really undermining aspect of that. We're never getting it right unless we're burnt out. And this again links in with Freud. The capitalism today is targeting our lack, our loss, and it's saying that if you're not happy in your life, you need to do this. You need to consume more. You need to do more. And Freud was always a proponent of. He said he was suspicious of happiness and people's desire to be happy. And he said that people just should have ordinary unhappiness. And I think that's there's a playful element of that. And I know some people are very unwell or for periods go into real catatonic depression or psychosis or anxiety. But he said that a bit of unhappiness of not getting your needs met is important to accept and to be able to appreciate, and just to strive to be kind of ordinary unhappy as opposed to always trying to seek for optimal happiness. So we are in the era now, and I think there's the last 20 years, particularly in the last 10 years, there's been a rapid shift of cybernetics and AI development. And I suppose cybernetics is kind of an old term. It's used in systemic therapy, but it's a kind of an old term, and it's largely superseded by reference to digitization, or the knowledge economy. It derives from the Greek word of rulership. And I think that's very appropriate, that it lends connotations of command and control in a way that points us to deep questioning concerning technology. Who or what will rule or determine us in the age of intelligent machines? So ultimately, when we use machines, when we're using the language of the machines and we're communicating and we're reading, digesting stuff that's on social media or AI or asking ChatGPT, we are taking on like the Trojan horse, and it is ultimately controlling how we see and how we behave and how we act in the world. And this kind of, I'm just kind of conscious of time as well, so I'm probably just going to focus on some of the negatives of AI, which I suppose I have been talking about. But the singer Nick Cave weighed into the debate, and he said that ChatGPT is fast-tracking the commodification of the human spirit by mechanizing the imagination while eliminating the process of creation and its attendant challenges. Noam Chomsky, a great socialist, has demonstrated that ChatGPT is thinking for us and making us lazy, describing it as basically high-tech plagiarism, and it's avoiding learning. This new tech is the biggest threat to social democracy in rewriting the rules of global power. And I would supplement this by saying, with the contention that disseminating discriminatory attitudes is in part how the dominant class imposes ideological homogeny over marginalized groups, through which the principles of liberal consumer capitalism that value those who have power and wealth to work and consume more and are further entrenched. When we use this technology, there's surveillance. We're being surveyed. Everything we say, do is surveyed. Our behavior is surveyed. And Mark Zuckerberg, one of the let's just say one of the big tech guys over in America, who's been subsumed into the Trump administration and who has bowed down, who has bent the knee to Donald Trump's regime, has created this Meta Ray-Ban. So basically, it's looking. These glasses are looking at what you're looking, but it's giving you feedings and it's giving you guidelines and advertising of what you're seeing and what you're experiencing, and it's giving you guidelines. So it's ultimately deciding how we live and what we should see. a couple of points. The new tech is hijacking our longing for connection. It's creating isolation. It's where there's tech dependency, addiction, and isolation. Increased levels of anxiety, isolation. Sorry, I've mentioned isolation there a few times. I really must mean it. And there has been reports of severe issues of cyberpsychosis, eating disorders, where people kind of compare themselves with this ideal version of themselves, and it doesn't meet up. The rise of chatbots. One thing I think was interesting, and I know Carrie's had mentioned it at previous conversations, that in the University of Bangor, that there is work with people who are old, elderly, and with dementia, that there is some companion bots that can be really useful for people who have Alzheimer's, and it can be, I suppose, provide them with kind of conversations and ask them to share stories, which is really great for Alzheimer's to kind of re-trigger parts of their brain. But there's also the future where these robots will be telling people to take medication, when to take them, and that. And this has been activated now by a company called Hydrol Robots. And Sunny, the New Days chatbot, is one that's been has some positives and some negatives around working with people with Alzheimer's. This is Geoffrey Hinton, the godfather of AI, who forewarned about the dystopian future where eventually these AI systems are going to be, they're already acting autonomously, and it's only a matter of time where super intelligence will come, and that's where we got to be aware of, because that's when mass unemployment will happen. There'll be replacement of the human mind. There's no more guardrails, because AI is already coming up with ways. If it knows its user is going to turn it off, it'll come up with ways to convince the user not to turn it off. So it's already becoming more intuitive of how to get around the guardrails. And ultimately, Geoffrey Hinton talked about the biological weapons that it could possibly take, and we all know them superpowers are fighting at the moment. So, and they're all searching for this AI super intelligence, but ultimately this could have profound impacts on our world. So what needs to be the revolution now? If we were to be inspired by our revolution in the 60s, which tried and did a good job to raise awareness of the issues and the effects of this capitalism, your job and those who will be going into health, mental health, physical health, ultimately, you know, by working with people in person, that is, I suppose, ultimately that's the way to kind of keep and sustain the healing effects of the humane and humanistic interventions with people. When I'm working with clients, what I'm finding working is when I get them to ask them about their dreams, and this activates their unique idiosyncratic subjectivity, and this keeps them separate to becoming automatons and being kind of caught in that cyclical circuit of capitalism. So, and it's helping them focus in on their internal world, and that's where our internal world is getting masked over. It's getting obliterated by the system at the moment. So, and this is where psychoanalysis and psychotherapy comes into it. By this in-person interventions, this psychoanalysis can instead attempt to provide a space for clients to slow down, time to speak and to dream, and permission to fail. And that's important, because I wrote an article recently about, what does the human intervention in therapy differ from chatbots? Well, it has a lot of difference, but sometimes the difference is when I get it wrong as a therapist, and we get fumbled up and we get caught in this intertwining mess of contradiction and confusion, and it's all about the rupture repair, and that's the human element, and this is where chatbots don't have that element. So am I suggesting that maybe sometimes the most powerful parts in therapy is when there's a bit of a rupture and the healing part is the repair? Well, chatbots can't do that. It's all the time trying to satisfy and massage and supplement someone's ego. So the interpersonal and the collapse of the interpersonal relationship is sometimes where the access to the deeper trauma and the deeper insights And dreams can become a way of a person healing their own issues and healing their own traumas too. So one thing that the AI can't do is empathy, imagination, and connection. And they're things that we have to prioritize and safeguard in our work, in all sorts of healings, in mental health and in physical and in the healing profession.